June 4, 1943, Fort Williams Medical Center, Virginia. The summer heat pressed down on the makeshift prisoner of war hospital as Corporal Heinrich Weber lay unconscious, his fever raging at 104 degrees. The attending physicians had given him less than 24 hours to live, another casualty of a severe infection that had already claimed 3 other prisoners that month. None of the German soldiers' comrades could have imagined that the woman about to walk through the door would not only save his life, but completely transform his understanding of humanity and worth. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the remarkable account of how a single act of compassion cut through years of indoctrination, revealing how even the deepest prejudices can crumble when confronted with genuine human kindness. It stands as testament to how personal experience can demolish the foundations of hatred more effectively than any military victory. Lieutenant Ada Robinson had not expected to be assigned to the prisoner of war ward that morning. With 3 years of nursing experience, including 18 months at Harlem Hospital in New York City, she had developed a reputation for being able to stabilize the most critical cases. As one of only 58 African-American nurses serving in the United States Army Nurse Corps at that time, Robinson faced a daily barrage of prejudice from both patients and fellow medical staff. Despite graduating at the top of her class from Howard University School of Nursing in 1940, she had been initially rejected by the Army Nurse Corps because of her race. Only after Executive Order 8802 was signed in 1941 did the military begin accepting black nurses, and even then, they were assigned to segregated units and typically only allowed to treat black servicemen. "We need you in Ward 6, Head Nurse Margaret Thatcher said, her voice clipped and professional as always. "They have a critical case and Dr. Patterson specifically requested you." Lieutenant Robinson raised an eyebrow. "Ward 6? The prisoner ward?" "Yes. Apparently, one of the Germans has a severe infection following surgery. His temperature won't stabilize and they've tried everything. Patterson says you have the best record with these types of cases." Robinson gathered her equipment, her mind racing. This would be her first time treating enemy combatants. The prisoners had been captured during the North Africa campaign, members of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps, and brought to Virginia 2 months earlier. Many had arrived wounded or malnourished after the long journey across the Atlantic. "Just remember, Lieutenant," Thatcher added, her voice lowering, "these men may be our prisoners, but they are still the enemy. They would not show you the same consideration if positions were reversed, certainly not someone of your background." Robinson nodded stiffly. "I understand, ma'am. I will provide the standard of care required by my oath, and nothing more." As she walked toward Ward 6, Lieutenant Robinson mentally prepared herself for what was to come. The United States was treating its prisoners according to the Geneva Convention, providing adequate food, medical care, and humane conditions. This was in stark contrast to reports coming from Europe about the treatment of Allied prisoners, particularly those of certain ethnic backgrounds or nationalities. Ward 6 was housed in a separate building, surrounded by a high fence topped with barbed wire. Armed guards stood at attention as Robinson approached, checking her identification before allowing her to pass. Inside, the ward was surprisingly clean and well organized, with 20 beds arranged in neat rows. Most were occupied by young German men, some reading, others playing chess or card games. Their conversations died down as she entered, and all eyes turned to her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "This way, Lieutenant," a medical orderly named James Parker said, leading her to a bed in the far corner that was partially screened off. "This is Corporal Weber, 23 years old. Took shrapnel to his right leg during the fighting at Kasserine Pass. The wound was infected by the time he arrived here. We performed surgery to remove remaining fragments 2 weeks ago, but the infection has worsened. His temperature has been climbing steadily for the past 48 hours. Robinson approached the bed and saw a young blond man, his face flushed with fever, his breathing shallow and rapid. His medical chart showed a dangerously high heart rate and blood pressure that was dropping steadily. Previous treatments had included sulfur drugs and penicillin, which was still experimental and in limited supply, but nothing had worked. Dr. Robert Patterson, A grey-haired man with tired eyes looked up as she approached. "Ah, Lieutenant Robinson, thank you for coming. I understand you had some success with similar cases in your previous rotation." "Yes, Doctor. I worked with Dr. Ellison developing a new protocol for treating antibiotic-resistant infections." Patterson nodded. "Good, because I have tried everything in the book with this young man, and nothing seems to be working. If you have any ideas, I am open to them. Otherwise, I fear he will not make it through the night." Robinson studied the patient's chart and examined his wound carefully. The incision from surgery was red and swollen, with purulent discharge visible beneath the bandages. She gently pressed the skin around the wound, noting the significant heat and induration extending up the leg. "I would like to try a continuous irrigation of the wound with a diluted iodine solution, along with hot and cold compresses to improve circulation," she suggested. "And I would recommend increasing his fluids significantly. He appears severely dehydrated, which is hampering his body's ability to fight the infection." Dr. Patterson considered her proposal. "The irrigation approach is unconventional, but at this point I am willing to try anything." "Very well, Lieutenant. Consider him your patient for the next 24 hours. If his condition improves, we will continue with your treatment plan." As Patterson left to attend to other patients, Robinson began preparing the materials she would need. She was acutely aware of the stares from both the German prisoners and the American guards. One prisoner in the next bed who spoke English watched her with particular intensity. "You are going to treat him?" the man asked, his accent thick but his words clear. "Yes, I am a nurse. That is my job," Robinson replied simply. "But you are," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward her. "A lieutenant in the United States Army Nurse Corps," she finished for him, her tone professional but firm. "And your friend is very ill. I suggest you let me do my work without interruption." For the next several hours, Lieutenant Robinson worked tirelessly. She set up an irrigation system for the wound, carefully monitoring the flow of the diluted iodine solution. She applied alternating hot and cold compresses to stimulate blood flow and periodically checked his vital signs. She spooned small amounts of water between his lips and wiped his brow when the fever caused him to toss and turn. As evening approached, several other nurses came to relieve her, but Robinson refused to leave. "His condition is still critical," she explained. "Any interruption in the treatment could set back any progress we have made. I will stay with him through the night." By midnight, Corporal Weber's fever had risen even higher, and he began to mumble deliriously in German. Robinson continued her ministrations, speaking soothingly to him even though she knew he could not understand her words. She adjusted his pillows, changed his soaked sheets, and continued the wound irrigation throughout the night. First Lieutenant Thomas Blackwell, who had been assigned as the ward's military liaison, stopped by during his rounds. "You should get some rest, Lieutenant Robinson," he suggested. "No one would blame you if this one did not make it. He is one of them, after all." Robinson looked up, her eyes tired but determined. "With all due respect, sir, in this room he is not one of them. He is my patient." Lieutenant Blackwell raised an eyebrow. "Even after everything their kind has done, the way they think about people like you." "I am not treating his thoughts, Lieutenant. I am treating his infection." She turned back to her patient, effectively dismissing the officer. As dawn broke, something unexpected happened. Corporal Weber's fever began to drop, not dramatically, but steadily. His breathing became less labored, and the angry redness around his wound had decreased slightly. By morning rounds, his temperature had fallen from 104 to 101 degrees. Dr. Patterson was visibly impressed when he examined the patient. "Whatever you did, Lieutenant, it appears to be working. Continue the treatment for another 24 hours, and let us see if the improvement holds." For 3 days, Lieutenant Robinson maintained her vigil, snatching only brief periods of rest, while other nurses monitored her patient. Gradually, Corporal Weber's condition improved. The infection began to recede, his fever dropped to normal, and on the 4th day, he finally regained consciousness. Heinrich Weber opened his eyes to see a black woman in an American military uniform checking the bottle of solution that was flowing into his wound. For a moment he simply stared, confusion evident on his face. Then, as awareness dawned, his expression hardened. "Was Max do?" he demanded weakly. "What are you doing?" The prisoner in the next bed, Sergeant Kurt Müller, translated for Robinson. "He wants to know what you are doing to him." Robinson's response was calm and professional. "Please tell him that I am a nurse who has been treating his infection. His condition was critical, but he is improving now. He should try to drink some water and rest." Müller translated, and Weber's eyes widened in disbelief. He said something rapid and angry in German. Müller hesitated before translating. "He says he does not want to be touched by someone like you. He requests a different nurse." Lieutenant Robinson had heard such sentiments before, not just from enemy prisoners, but from American soldiers as well. She maintained her professional demeanor as she replied, "Please inform Corporal Weber that I am the nurse assigned to his case, and I will continue to provide treatment until Dr. Patterson decides otherwise. If he refuses treatment, that is his right, but it may result in a return of the infection, which could cost him his leg or possibly his life." After Müller translated, Weber glared at Robinson, but did not object further when she checked his vital signs and changed his bandages. His eyes followed her every movement with a mixture of suspicion and bewilderment. Over the next several days, Robinson continued to care for Weber, despite his obvious discomfort with her presence. She maintained her professionalism, explaining each procedure through Müller's translation and treating him with the same care she would give any patient. Gradually, Weber's hostility began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. 1 week after regaining consciousness, Weber spoke directly to Robinson for the first time in broken English. "Why you help me?" he asked during a bandage change. "I am enemy." Robinson paused, considering her answer carefully. "Because you needed help," she said simply, "and because that is what I was trained to do." Weber frowned, clearly struggling with this concept. "But in Germany, they say, people like you, not the same as us." "And what do you think now?" Robinson asked, meeting his gaze steadily. Weber looked away, unable to answer. As Weber's recovery progressed, the dynamics in Ward 6 began to shift. Other German prisoners, who had initially avoided interaction with Robinson, began to ask for her assistance with minor ailments. They observed how Weber's condition improved under her care, and their curiosity overcame their prejudice. Sergeant Müller became an unofficial intermediary, helping to facilitate communication between Robinson and the German patients. A former schoolteacher from Munich, Müller had been drafted into the army in 1940. Unlike many of his comrades, he had never fully embraced the regime's racial ideologies. "You must understand," Müller explained to Robinson one quiet afternoon, "most of these men have never met anyone like you before. Everything they know comes from what they were taught." "And what were they taught?" Robinson asked, though she already knew the answer. Müller sighed. "That people of different races are inherently unequal, that there is a natural hierarchy, with us at the top and others below. It is what our leaders have been saying for years in our schools, our newspapers, our radio programs. Many believed it without question. And you, Sergeant Müller, what do you believe?" He was quiet for a moment. "I have read books that were banned. Authors like Thomas Mann who spoke against such ideas. I knew the teachings were wrong, but it was dangerous to say so." He glanced around the ward. "But now seeing you, how you care for us despite who we are and what our country stands for, it makes many of us question everything we were told." By the 3rd week, Weber had made remarkable progress. The infection had cleared completely, and he was able to stand and take short walks with the aid of crutches. During these exercises, supervised by Robinson, their conversations became more frequent and less strained. "In my hometown Freiburg," Weber said one day, "there was a university with students from many countries. Before the war, I mean. My father would point to them and say they were corrupting German culture. I never questioned it. Now I wonder what else he was wrong about." Robinson listened without judgment. People often fear what they do not understand. Sometimes it takes a personal encounter to challenge those fears. Weber nodded slowly. "When I was very ill, I had dreams, strange dreams. In one, I was drowning in the desert, which makes no sense. But you were there pulling me out of the sand. I did not want your help because of how you look, but you saved me anyway." He looked down at his healing leg. And then you really did save me. As Weber's recovery continued, the atmosphere in Ward 6 evolved further. The German prisoners began to form a small community, with Robinson as an unexpected central figure. They asked her questions about her education, her hometown of Philadelphia, and her experiences as a nurse. Many were surprised to learn of her extensive training and qualifications. Medical orderly James Parker noticed the change. "I have never seen anything like it," he remarked to Dr. Patterson. "Those men look at her like she is some kind of miracle worker." "In a way she is," Patterson replied, "not just for healing their bodies, but for giving them a reason to reconsider their worldview. That kind of transformation is rare indeed." Word of Robinson's success with the German prisoners spread throughout the hospital. Some staff members were resentful, questioning why an African-American nurse was being wasted on enemy combatants. Others recognized the unique opportunity this presented for both rehabilitation and intelligence gathering. Colonel William Donovan, the commanding officer of Fort Williams, requested a meeting with Lieutenant Robinson in early July. A decorated veteran of the First World War, Donovan had a reputation for forward-thinking and pragmatism. "Lieutenant, your work in Ward 6 has come to my attention," he said, reviewing her reports. "Dr. Patterson speaks very highly of your skills and your approach to the patients." "Thank you, sir. I'm simply doing my duty." "Perhaps, but you have accomplished something beyond medical care." He leaned forward. "These men were captured fighting for a regime that considers people of your race to be inferior. Yet under your care, they have not only recovered physically but have begun to question those beliefs. That is quite remarkable." Robinson remained modest. "They are far from home, wounded, and uncertain of their future. Such circumstances often make people more receptive to new perspectives." Donovan nodded thoughtfully. "The War Department has been developing programs for the re-education of prisoners of war. The goal is to expose them to American democratic values and prepare them for a post-conflict Germany. Your experience with these men could provide valuable insights for this initiative." While Robinson considered this proposal, events in Ward 6 took an unexpected turn. A new group of prisoners arrived from a different theater of operations. Among them was Oberleutnant Franz Steiner, a dedicated party member who had served as a political officer in his unit. Steiner was quick to notice the rapport between the German prisoners and Lieutenant Robinson. During recreation time in the enclosed yard, Steiner confronted Weber and the others. "Have you forgotten everything? Consorting with Untermenschen, allowing yourself to be treated by one of them? You bring shame to your uniform and your country." Weber, now able to walk with only a slight limp, stood his ground. "Lieutenant Robinson saved my life when your precious leadership left us to die in Africa. She has shown more humanity than many of our own people." Steiner's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly what they want, to poison your minds while you are vulnerable. When the war is won, how will you explain your betrayal?" "The only betrayal was believing the lies we were told," Weber replied, several other prisoners nodding in agreement. "If you spent some time actually talking to her instead of judging based on appearance, you might learn something." Steiner spat on the ground. "You are all contaminated. When we return home, there will be a reckoning for collaborators." The confrontation created a division among the prisoners. Most of those who had been under Robinson's care sided with Weber, while some of the newcomers aligned with Steiner. The guards observed the rift with interest, reporting it to their superiors as potential intelligence. Lieutenant Robinson was advised to be cautious around the new prisoners, particularly Steiner, who had made his hostility clear. However, she refused to alter her treatment approach. "If I begin discriminating between patients based on their political beliefs or their attitude toward me, I become no better than those who discriminate against me because of my race," she explained to Dr. Patterson. Patterson frowned. "Your principles do you credit, Lieutenant, but your safety is also a concern. Some of these men are deeply indoctrinated." "All the more reason to show them another way," Robinson replied. As summer progressed, the tension in Ward 6 remained, but an unexpected opportunity for change emerged. The hospital received word that a group of American prisoners had been repatriated from Germany due to severe injuries, and they would be arriving at Fort Williams for continued treatment. Among them was Technical Sergeant James Wilson, an African-American soldier from the 92nd Infantry Division. Wilson had been captured during operations in Italy and had sustained multiple fractures to his right arm and shoulder. His treatment in German captivity had been minimal, focused on keeping him alive rather than properly healing his injuries. As a result, his arm had healed incorrectly and required extensive reconstruction. When Wilson was brought to the hospital, Robinson was assigned as part of his care team. During his initial examination, Wilson described his experiences as a prisoner. "They treated us differently," he explained, wincing as Dr. Patterson examined his malformed arm. "The white POWs got better food, better medical care. They kept us separate most of the time. Some guards were worse than others, but none of them saw us as equal." Robinson listened with a heavy heart, but without surprise. "I am sorry you experienced that, Sergeant. Rest assured that you will receive the best possible care here." Word of Wilson's arrival spread through Ward 6, and many of the German prisoners were curious about the African-American soldier who had been held by their countrymen. Weber, in particular, seemed troubled by the reports of differential treatment. One afternoon, as Robinson was checking Weber's leg, which was now almost fully healed, he asked, "The black soldier, is it true how he was treated?" Robinson met his gaze steadily. "Yes, according to his account." Weber looked away, shame evident on his face. "I would have done the same before, treated him as less. Now I cannot understand why." "People can change, Corporal Weber. You are proof of that." Weber shook his head slowly. "Not everyone. Steiner and his group, they still believe the old ways. They talk about when Germany will win, how the world will be remade. They cannot see that it is already ending." Indeed, news from the war front was increasingly grim for Germany. The Soviet forces had won a decisive victory at Kursk, and Allied forces had landed in Sicily, beginning the Italian campaign. These developments fueled both despair and fanaticism among the prisoners, with some accepting that defeat was inevitable, while others clung more desperately to their indoctrination. In an unprecedented move, Colonel Donovan approved a carefully supervised meeting between Weber and Sergeant Wilson. The encounter was arranged in the hospital library, a neutral space where both men could speak freely, under the watchful eyes of guards and medical staff. Robinson was present as both a medical attendant and a facilitator. The meeting began awkwardly, with both men sizing each other up cautiously. "Sergeant Wilson, this is Corporal Weber," Robinson introduced them. "He has expressed interest in hearing about your experiences firsthand." Wilson, his arm in a complex brace, nodded stiffly. "What do you want to know, Corporal?" Weber hesitated, searching for the right words in his limited English. "I want to know how you were treated as prisoner, and why you fight for country that also treats you not equal." Wilson's expression hardened. "You want to know why I fight? I fight because, despite its flaws, America is my home. Because the ideals it claims to stand for are worth fighting for, even if it fails to live up to them sometimes. And because men like you threatened not just those ideals, but the very existence of people who look like me." Weber absorbed this, nodding slowly. "In Germany, they tell us America is hypocrite, talks of freedom but keeps some people down. They use this to say their way is more honest. There is nothing honest about declaring an entire group of people inferior based on how they look," Wilson replied firmly. "America has its sins to answer for, but at least here, people like Lieutenant Robinson can fight for change. Can you say the same about Germany under your leadership?" The conversation continued for nearly an hour, touching on both men's backgrounds, their experiences of the war, and their perspectives on race and nationality. By the end, while they had not become friends, there was a mutual respect that had seemed impossible at the beginning. As they prepared to leave, Weber said something that surprised everyone present. "I am sorry. For how you were treated by my countrymen, it was wrong." Wilson studied him for a long moment. "You are not responsible for what others did, but you are responsible for what you do now and in the future." The meeting between Weber and Wilson became a talking point throughout the hospital. Some staff members viewed it as a promising sign of rehabilitation, while others dismissed it as an isolated case that could not be replicated on a larger scale. For Lieutenant Robinson, however, it represented something more profound, the power of personal connection to overcome entrenched prejudice. She documented the case thoroughly, including not just Weber's physical recovery, but his psychological evolution as well. In August, Robinson received unexpected news. Due to her exemplary service and the success of her approaches with the German prisoners, she was being considered for promotion to captain and reassignment to a larger POW facility, where her methods could be implemented on a broader scale. "This is a remarkable opportunity, Lieutenant," Colonel Donovan told her. "Your work here has demonstrated that medical care can be a vehicle for more than physical healing. It can also begin to heal minds poisoned by hateful ideologies." Robinson was honored but conflicted. "I appreciate the recognition, sir, but my work here is not yet complete. Many of the prisoners are still in need of care, and the progress we have made is still fragile." "Progress is always fragile, Lieutenant, but it must spread to be meaningful. Think of how many more men like Corporal Weber might benefit from your approach in a larger facility." As Robinson considered the offer, a crisis erupted in Ward 6. Oberleutnant Steiner, whose hatred had been festering for weeks, orchestrated a small protest among his followers. They refused treatment from Robinson or any other African-American staff members, demanding to be seen only by white medical personnel. The hospital administration's initial response was to consider accommodating this demand to maintain order. Robinson, however, stood firm against such a concession. "If we allow them to dictate their care based on racial prejudice, we undermine everything we claim to stand for," she argued in a staff meeting. "These men are not just patients. They are prisoners of a regime built on the very ideology they are now expressing. Accommodating their demands would be a step backward, not just for this facility, but for the principles we are fighting to defend." Her passionate advocacy swayed Colonel Donovan, who decided that the standard rotation of medical personnel would continue regardless of the prisoners' protests. Those who refused treatment would bear the consequences of their choice. When this decision was communicated to the prisoners, Steiner's reaction was predictable. He denounced it as tyranny and urged his followers to stand firm. What he had not anticipated, however, was the response from Weber and the other prisoners who had been under Robinson's care. "You speak of tyranny," Weber challenged him publicly, "yet you would deny treatment from the most skilled nurse in this hospital because of your blind prejudice. Who is the tyrant here?" The confrontation nearly became physical before guards intervened. In the aftermath, several of Steiner's supporters began to waver, particularly when one developed a serious respiratory infection and received exemplary care from Robinson, despite his previous refusal. By September, the divide among the prisoners had largely dissolved. Steiner maintained his stance, but found himself increasingly isolated as more of his former supporters came to accept or even appreciate Robinson's care. Some, like Weber, went further, actively questioning the racial theories that had once seemed unassailable truth. As Robinson prepared for her new assignment, she received a handwritten note from Corporal Weber. "Lieutenant Robinson," it read in careful English, "when I came to this place, I was not just wounded in body but in mind. I believed things about people like you that I now know were lies. You did more than save my life. You saved my humanity by showing me yours. When this war ends and I return home, I promise I will remember what you taught me, not just about medicine, but about seeing people as they truly are. Thank you for treating not just my infection, but my ignorance." Robinson was deeply moved by the note. When she shared it with Colonel Donovan, he saw it as validation of his decision to expand her approach to other facilities. "This is exactly why your work is so valuable, Lieutenant," he said. "One mind changed may seem small in the context of a global war, but multiply that by hundreds or thousands, and you begin to see how true victory will be achieved, not just on battlefields, but in hearts and minds." In her final days at Fort Williams, Robinson continued her rounds in Ward 6, saying goodbye to the patients who had become something more than just enemy prisoners in her care. Many expressed gratitude, some asked for addresses where they might write after the war, and a few, like Weber, shared how profoundly their perspectives had changed. On her last day, she found Sergeant Wilson waiting for her outside the hospital entrance. "I heard you are leaving us, Lieutenant," he said, his arm still in its brace but healing well. Yes, new assignment, bigger facility, more responsibility. Wilson nodded. That German, Weber. He came to see me yesterday. Wanted to talk more about what things might be like after the war. Said he wanted to make sure people back home knew the truth. Not just about who won or lost, but about people being people, no matter what they look like. He shook his head in wonder. Never thought I would have a conversation like that with someone who fought for their side. People can surprise you, Sergeant. You surprised him. Changed his whole world by just doing your job and treating him like a human being. Wilson smiled slightly. Maybe there is hope for the world after all, if there are more people like you in it. Robinson's work at Fort Williams became the foundation for a broader initiative within POW camps across the United States. Her methods were studied and implemented by other medical professionals, and her case notes on Weber and others were used in training materials for staff working with enemy prisoners. After the war ended in 1945, many German POWs held in American camps returned to a devastated homeland, carrying with them experiences that often conflicted dramatically with the ideologies they had once embraced. Some, like Heinrich Weber, became advocates for tolerance and understanding in the difficult Reconstruction period. Weber returned to Freiburg, which was now part of the French occupation zone. He studied medicine at the reopened university, specializing in rehabilitative care. In 1953, he established a clinic that provided treatment to all patients, regardless of background or ethnicity, a radical concept in a society still grappling with the legacy of its recent past. In 1960, Lieutenant Robinson, now Dr. Ada Robinson, received a letter from Germany. It was from Weber, inviting her to speak at an international medical conference in Freiburg. He explained that he had named his clinic's rehabilitation wing after her, and wanted her to see firsthand the impact her care had on not just his life, but the lives of countless others. "What you taught me has spread," he wrote. "Each patient who comes through our doors experiences the same compassionate care, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they believe. In this way, your healing continues to ripple outward, touching lives you may never meet, but who benefit from the lesson you taught one frightened, ignorant soldier in a prison ward so many years ago." Robinson accepted the invitation, traveling to Germany the following spring. The reunion between the former nurse and prisoner was covered by local newspapers as a symbol of reconciliation and the power of individual actions to overcome systemic hatred. The photograph of Robinson and Weber, now colleagues in the medical field, standing together outside the clinic bearing her name, became an iconic image of post-war healing. The story of Lieutenant Robinson and Corporal Weber might have remained a footnote in the vast chronicles of World War II, but its impact continued to resonate. Their experience demonstrated how personal connections could undermine even the most deeply ingrained prejudices, and how compassion could serve as a bridge between divided worlds. In her address at the medical conference, Robinson reflected on those tumultuous days at Fort Williams. "Medicine teaches us to look beyond the surface," she told the assembled physicians and nurses. "When we treat a patient, we do not see enemy or ally, stranger or friend. We see a human being in need. If we could extend that same perspective to all our interactions, perhaps we would find fewer reasons for conflict and more opportunities for understanding." Weber, sitting in the front row, nodded in agreement. The journey from wounded prisoner to respected physician had been long and difficult, but it had begun with a simple act of care from someone he had been taught to despise. That act had not just healed his body, but had begun the healing of a mind poisoned by hatred and fear. In the years that followed, Robinson and Weber maintained a correspondence, sharing their experiences and the progress of their respective work. Their unlikely friendship stood as testament to the possibility of transformation, even in the face of history's darkest chapters. When Robinson passed away in 1978, Weber traveled to Philadelphia for her funeral. Among her personal effects was the note he had written to her 35 years earlier, carefully preserved along with other mementos from her pioneering career. Weber established a scholarship in her name at Howard University School of Nursing, ensuring that her legacy would continue through new generations of caregivers who would learn not just the science of healing bodies, but the art of healing divisions between people. The story of Lieutenant Ada Robinson and Corporal Heinrich Weber reminds us that even in times of global conflict and ideological extremism, individual actions matter. A single person, remaining true to their principles and treating others with dignity regardless of circumstance, can plant seeds of change that grow far beyond the moment. It demonstrates that transformation often begins not with grand gestures or sweeping policies, but with personal encounters that challenge our preconceptions and force us to reconcile our beliefs with our experiences. When hatred meets compassion, when ideology confronts humanity, the resulting conflict is not fought with weapons, but within the heart and mind of each individual. In the quiet wards of a prisoner of war hospital, an African-American nurse and a German soldier unwittingly began such a battle. Its victory was measured not in territory gained or enemies defeated, but in perspectives broadened and prejudices abandoned. And while it may have seemed insignificant against the backdrop of a world at war, its impact continued to ripple outward long after the guns fell silent, touching lives and changing hearts in ways that could never be fully measured. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Do not forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.